I am Ibrahim Traoré, President of the nation of Burkina Faso. I speak today not first as a president or a soldier or a man of authority, but as a human being who reached the edge of his own strength. There was a day when the weight of Burkina Faso pressed fully onto my chest. It was not a dramatic day. There were no cameras, no speeches, no crowds. I sat alone for a long time. Silence surrounded me, but my thoughts were loud. Our country was standing at a dangerous moment. Violence and insecurity were spreading across regions. Villages were attacked. Families fled their homes with nothing but fear and memory. Children learned the sound of gunfire before the sound of school bells. Fear became part of daily life, not because people were weak, but because instability had become constant. Poverty was deepening. Hunger was no longer seasonal but continuous. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Clinics lacked medicine. Schools lacked supplies. Too many children grew up without proper care, not because their parents did not love them, but because the system failed them. What hurt me most was not only the suffering itself, but the loss of trust. People questioned leadership. They questioned promises. They questioned the future. Many felt abandoned, not angry always, often just tired. Tired of waiting, tired of hearing words without change. I did what leaders are trained to do. I reviewed policies, I examined budgets, I asked for reports, I studied security strategies and development plans, I listened to advisors. I searched for solutions that could be measured, funded, enforced. But the more I thought, the clearer one truth became. My tools had limits. Authority has limits. Strategy has limits. Even the strongest will has limits. A nation cannot be healed by force alone. A people cannot be restored by orders alone. That night, exhaustion won. I stopped thinking. I stopped planning. My body gave way before my mind could find answers. And I fell asleep. In sleep, I entered a moment that did not feel like imagination and did not feel like fear. It felt calm. It felt clear. In the dream, I saw Jesus. He did not appear as a figure of power. He did not stand above others. He did not wear symbols of rule. He walked among the poor. He moved at their pace. He listened before he spoke. I recognized him not by glory, but by presence. He looked at me as a teacher looks at a student who is tired, not disappointed, not angry, but honest. He said, "Tomorrow is the Sabbath. You must rest. Leave the affairs of this nation to me." There was no threat in his voice, no command backed by force, only certainty. I wanted to speak. I wanted to explain that a country cannot pause, that threats do not rest, that hunger does not wait, that responsibility does not allow silence. But before I could speak, he continued. He gave me 4 instructions, not as slogans, not as ideology, as guidance. First, he said, be a leader of integrity. Do not use crisis to build personal power. Do not turn fear into control. Do not let emergency justify corruption. Integrity is not proven when times are easy, but when temptation is strong. Second, he said, be a leader who loves. Put the pain of the people above political advantage. Listen to suffering even when it is inconvenient. Policies without compassion become tools of harm, even when intentions are good. Third, he said, be a leader who stands against injustice. Do not remain silent when wrong is committed. Pressure will come, danger will come, but silence in the face of injustice destroys peace more surely than conflict. Fourth, he said, be a leader of humility. Know that peace cannot be achieved by violence alone. Force may stop an attack, but it cannot heal a society. True peace grows where dignity is protected and truth is respected. Then the dream ended. I woke with my heart racing, not from fear, but from weight. I knew this was not a dream to be admired and forgotten. It was a call. The next day arrived, and I obeyed. I postponed urgent meetings. I set aside security briefings. I did not read intelligence reports. I did not search for immediate solutions. I rested. I prayed. I listened. This was not weakness. It was discipline. It was not escape. It was trust. In a nation shaped by both Islam and Christianity, rest is not idleness. It is submission. It is acknowledgement that human strength is not the highest authority. In that stillness, I understood something important. A leader who never stops cannot hear. Several days passed after that Sabbath. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. There were no sudden victories, no miracles that could be announced on the radio. Life continued with its usual pressure. Threats still existed. Hunger did not disappear overnight. But something had changed inside me. When the most important meeting arrived, I entered the room differently. I did not arrive with certainty. I arrived with attention. I did not seek to dominate the discussion. I sought to understand. Three major difficulties were placed before us. They were not new. We had discussed them many times before. Yet this time the conversation moved in a different direction. The first was security. For years we had spoken about security mainly in terms of weapons operations and territory. We measured success by numbers of deployments and engagements. But that day a simple truth became clear to us. Force alone was not enough. We saw that protecting civilians had to be the center, not the result. We recognized that communities must not feel like battlegrounds but like partners. We began shaping a strategy that combined security presence with dialogue, with local leaders, with protection of displaced families, and with paths for those who had gone astray to return to society. Not everyone agreed immediately. There were concerns, there were risks, but there was clarity. Security that ignores people creates more enemies than it defeats. The second difficulty was hunger and poverty. For years we relied on short-term aid. Emergency food deliveries, temporary relief, necessary actions but never lasting ones. That day we recognized the deeper issue. A nation cannot survive by waiting for rescue. We turned our focus to local agriculture, fair distribution, to empowering villages to produce and manage their own food. We discussed land access, water systems training, and community ownership. We spoke not of charity but of dignity. Food security is not only about calories, it is about control over one's own life. The third difficulty was trust. This was the hardest. We acknowledged openly that people had lost faith, not because they were disloyal, but because they had been disappointed too often. Words were spoken without follow-through. Decisions were made without explanation. So we committed to transparency, to listening, to explaining not everything but enough to show respect. We committed to ethics over propaganda, to truth over appearance. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned slowly. As these ideas took shape, I understood something deeply. We were not suddenly wiser. We did not discover perfect plans. We did not become stronger overnight. We had simply stopped long enough to allow God to work where human effort had reached its limit. That is when I understood the Sabbath, not as a pause from responsibility, but as a correction of pride. From that moment, I no longer saw the Sabbath as a private practice. I saw it as a lesson for a nation. When leaders stop pretending they are all-powerful, when they listen instead of rush, when they act with humility, then hope can begin to grow, even in the driest land. From that moment forward, I began to reflect not only on my own role, but on the path of our nation and our region. Burkina Faso is not alone in its suffering. Across the Sahel, many nations carry the same wounds. Violence crosses borders, hunger ignores flags, fear travels faster than armies. And when one country weakens, the others feel it. I speak now to the leaders of the Sahel. We inherited borders drawn without our consent and systems designed without our voice. We inherited economies that extract more than they build and security structures that protect interests more than people. For many years we were told that stability would come if we followed instructions written elsewhere. But stability does not grow from dependency. It grows from responsibility. It grows when leaders are accountable to their people before they are accountable to foreign approval. It grows when security is designed to protect communities, not to manage headlines. It grows when development begins in villages, not in conference rooms. I also speak to the Christian community of Africa. The story I shared is not meant to divide or convert. It is meant to remind. Jesus walked among the poor. He spoke truth without violence. He challenged injustice without hatred. His life was not about power, but about service. For African Christians, leadership must reflect that example. Faith cannot be separated from responsibility. Prayer cannot replace action, but action without prayer becomes empty. And I speak to the Muslim community of Africa. Rest, submission, and humility are not foreign ideas. They are deeply rooted in Islamic teaching. Leadership in Islam is trust, not privilege. Justice, mercy, and protection of the vulnerable are not optional values. They are obligations. When leaders act with arrogance, they betray both God and people. When leaders act with humility, they create space for peace. To both faith communities, I say this: Africa does not need religious conflict. Africa needs moral leadership. Our faiths should not be weapons, they should be foundations. Finally, I speak to the international community. Africa is often spoken about, but rarely listened to. We are described as fragile, unstable, or dependent, yet our people survive conditions that would break many societies. Our communities adapt, innovate, and endure. What we ask for is not charity. It is respect. Respect for our sovereignty. Respect for our choices. Respect for our right to build security systems that reflect our realities. Respect for our right to develop without being punished for independence. Partnership must be honest. Assistance must not come with control. Cooperation must not replace dignity. The future of Africa will not be decided in foreign capitals. It will be decided in our fields, our towns, and our councils. And it will be shaped by whether our leaders choose integrity over ambition, love over advantage, courage over silence, and humility over force. This is not a religious speech, it is a human one. When a leader learns to stop, when a nation learns to listen, and when faith guides action without domination, then even the most wounded land can begin to heal. I want to return to something simple but often forgotten. Leadership is not movement without pause. Leadership is knowing when to move and when to stop. In our world, stopping is seen as weakness, silence is seen as avoidance, rest is seen as irresponsibility. But history teaches us something different. Nations collapse not only from attack but from exhaustion. Leaders fail not only from bad intentions but from refusing to listen. The Sabbath is not only a religious instruction, it is a moral boundary. It reminds those in power that they are not the source of life, that authority has limits, that human judgment must sometimes step aside. When I rested, I did not abandon my duty. I acknowledged its weight. To the people of Burkina Faso, I say this clearly. Your suffering was not ignored. Your pain was not unseen. Your doubts were not dismissed. The decisions we began to make after that moment were not sudden reactions. They were commitments shaped by humility. They were not promises made for applause. They were responsibilities accepted with caution. Security must protect life, not consume it. Development must restore dignity, not create dependency. Governance must serve truth, not appearance. To the elders of our villages, I say your wisdom matters. To our women who carry families through hardship, I say your strength is the foundation of this nation. To our youth who feel forgotten, I say your future is not lost. And to our soldiers, I say your courage is honored, but your mission must always be guided by restraint and respect for those you protect. I speak again to the wider African continent. We have tried imported solutions for decades. Some helped, many failed. Not because Africans are incapable, but because solutions disconnected from culture, faith, and local reality cannot take root. Africa does not reject cooperation. Africa rejects control. Africa does not reject faith. Africa rejects its misuse. Africa does not reject strength. Africa rejects violence without purpose. The example of Jesus is not domination but sacrifice. The example of faith in Islam is not conquest but justice. These are not foreign ideas, they are deeply African. Our ancestors understood community before contracts, responsibility before entitlement, honor before power. We must recover that understanding. To international partners who watch us closely, I say this. Judge us by outcomes, not by obedience. Engage us as equals, not as projects. Listen before advising. Support without directing. A world that claims to value human rights must respect the right of peoples to choose their own path, even when that path is difficult. Peace cannot be imposed, it must be built. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. Hope cannot be announced, it must be cultivated patiently. That is why the lesson of that Sabbath remains with me. Not because it solved everything, but because it reminded me of my place. A leader is not a savior, a leader is a servant. A nation is not strong because it never stops. A nation is strong because it knows when to reflect. If Africa is to rise, it will not be through louder speeches or faster decisions. It will be through leaders who dare to slow down long enough to choose wisely. This is not retreat, it is preparation. There is something else I learned that day that I must share openly. Fear makes leaders rush. Fear makes nations react instead of choose. Fear pushes decisions that satisfy urgency but damage the future. When violence spreads, the instinct is to strike harder. When hunger grows, the instinct is to distribute quickly. When trust collapses, the instinct is to speak louder. But speed is not wisdom. In Burkina Faso, we have lived too long in emergency mode. Every year felt like a crisis year. Every decision felt like the last chance. That state of mind slowly removes reflection. It replaces judgment with habit. The Sabbath broke that cycle. It forced me to accept that I cannot solve everything at once. That some problems require patience, not pressure. That some wounds heal only when they are no longer torn open every day. I speak now honestly to our security forces and institutions. Strength without discipline becomes destruction. Power without restraint becomes abuse. Victory without justice becomes resentment. Our mission is not to defeat an enemy at any cost. Our mission is to protect life, to preserve dignity, to allow children to grow without learning hatred as a first language. Security that forgets humanity will always fail eventually. I also speak to those who feel tempted by violence. There is no glory in destroying your own people. There is no honor in terrorizing villages. There is no future built on fear. If there is a path back, it must be real. Reintegration is not forgiveness without accountability. It is responsibility combined with mercy. To our farmers and workers, I say this: the land of Burkina Faso is not cursed. It has been neglected. It has been mismanaged. It has been controlled by systems that favored export over survival. We are learning again how to feed ourselves, not quickly, not easily, but honestly. Food grown by our own hands is not just nourishment, it is independence. And to our teachers and health workers, I say your work is not invisible. It is the quiet defense of the nation. No army can replace education. No weapon can substitute for care. When schools close and clinics fail, insecurity grows faster than any armed group. This is why rest matters. Rest creates clarity. Clarity creates restraint. Restraint creates space for wisdom. I did not stop because everything was safe. I stopped because nothing was safe without humility. And that lesson applies beyond Burkina Faso. Across Africa, leaders face pressure to act constantly, to speak constantly, to prove strength constantly, but strength that never rests eventually breaks. The Sabbath reminds us that leadership is stewardship, not ownership. We are temporary. Our people are permanent. We must govern with that truth in mind. As I bring these reflections together, I want to speak plainly about faith and its place in public life. Faith is not a policy. It is not a weapon. It is not a slogan to gain loyalty. Faith is a compass. It does not tell us every step, but it tells us when we are lost. In Africa, faith has always lived close to daily life. It is present in hardship and in joy. It gives people strength when institutions fail and hope when systems collapse. That is why leaders must approach faith with respect and restraint. I did not share this story to claim divine authority. I shared it to admit human limitation. Jesus did not tell me how to draft a budget. He did not give me a military plan. He reminded me of character, of posture, of humility. That matters. When leaders believe they are chosen above accountability, disaster follows. When leaders believe they are servants under judgment, peace becomes possible. To Christian believers, I say this: the life of Jesus does not excuse injustice committed in his name. It condemns it. His example demands integrity, compassion, courage, and humility. Any leadership that claims his name but rejects his values is false. To Muslim believers, I say this: submission to God requires justice toward people. Authority is a trust. Arrogance in leadership is a violation of that trust. Mercy and responsibility are not weaknesses. They are obligations. To both communities together, I say this: our faiths must meet in service, not in competition, in protection of the poor, not in argument, in building peace, not in claiming superiority. Africa has suffered enough from divisions imposed and exploited. We cannot allow religion to become another tool of separation. To the international community, I make one final appeal. Do not fear African independence. Do not mistake dignity for hostility. Do not interpret self-determination as rejection. We are not turning away from the world. We are asking the world to meet us differently. Support our efforts to build local food systems, to strengthen civilian protection, to restore trust between people and institutions, not because it aligns with your strategy, but because it aligns with human dignity. The Sabbath taught me that leadership begins with listening, not only to advisors and allies, but to conscience, to faith, to the quiet truth that power often tries to silence. Burkina Faso is still walking a difficult path. There is no illusion of easy victory. There is only commitment. Commitment to protect life, commitment to act with integrity, commitment to choose humility over domination. If hope is growing in our land, it is not because the soil changed. It is because we chose to stop pretending we could control everything. Sometimes the most responsible act of leadership is to pause, to listen, and to let God do the work that human hands cannot. That is the lesson I carry forward, and that is the lesson I offer to Africa and to the world.